Welcome to International Radio Tours. This is your host, Rich Gehlhausen. Today we're featuring author John Nuckel. John's a Wall Street insider who's witnessed the internal financial arena. He's authored a trilogy, actually a continuing book series, and he's won an award for his first book. John will be on an international radio book tour starting with today all the way through October 20th. John, welcome to the show.
Hi, Rich. How are you?
Doing good. And John, you're in New York City. What's your weather like there today?
Well, the weather, I'm actually in as good a mood as I've been in quite a while, since the weather is wonderful. Spring's on the way. Summer's on the way, and my New York Mets are in first place for the first time in like 7 years. So I'm choosing to be happy about it. I'm not worrying about injuries or what may be down the road. I am happy now.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk about writing and writing a trilogy. Actually, you've written a trilogy, but it's going to be a continuing book series. But let's talk about writing in general first. You grew up in New York. Were there things that happened in your childhood that may have inspired you to become a writer?
Yeah, I think, I grew up pretty much on the borderline between Long Island and Queens. And to be honest with you, it was... used to call it the welfare apartments. Like, that's where we live. So I sort of grew up in sort of a rough neighborhood. And but what was interesting was there was 5 kids in a 2-bedroom apartment. But what was really good was there was always something going on. Like, my mother in particular was a very creative person. And a little wacky too. Like, she used to dress us up. When we were little kids, she would dress us up. She would say, "Today we're all going to be cowboys." And she'd dress us all in cowboy clothing, and we'd play cowboy games. And I just thought of something the other day, which was really funny, which tells you her sense of humor. She had us convinced that she was Miss Brooklyn when she was a kid. And here's what I like. Her talent was tap dancing. So as kids would go, "Tap dance, Mommy, tap." And she'd go, No, I'm retired. So that's sort of the atmosphere. But there was always music playing, and we used to just read voraciously. I mean, I would, as long as I can remember, I'd go through like a book every 2 weeks. So it was, we were packed in, we were close together, but there was a lot going on, man. It really was. It was really nice.
Well, your career was in the stock market. Various aspects of financial industry, but when did you feel that suddenly realized? Was it like one day you woke up and you decided I'm a writer? How did that come about?
Well, I was in the stock market, and I think what makes my writing different than a lot of the Wall Street or the financial thrillers is that I was actually, standing in the trading pit. So that scandal that you read about that happened, I was the guy who they were selling the stock to. Or I was selling the stock to them, and I was ahead of them. But I was in the middle of all of it. So it wasn't like, I interviewed people. And for the most, another thing, like part of some of my stories, that there's a whole 9/11 aspect to it at the beginning of the story. And I was there. I was running down Broadway when the tower was coming down, with stuff flying over my head. So I was in the middle of it. And as far as taking that from writing is, these life experiences are things that really affected me. That being on the trading floor was such an impactful part of my life, and such an interesting place to be. At that time, the people were so interesting, and very varied backgrounds. That, I'd always been writing, but I never considered myself a writer.
What do you mean?
And then I just started putting my stories down on paper,
John, when you say that you've always been a writer, what do you mean by that?
I've always been the guy who people would come to write a toast, or if it was someone's 70th birthday, I would write a little thing that the wife would stand up and read. And I don't know exactly how I got that reputation. I think it started when I wrote a actual business presentation for a colleague for the opening of a national sales meeting. And it went over so well. So finally, my wife actually said to me, "Why don't you go take a class?" And I joined the New York Writer's Studio. And what I did was I sort of snuck myself into the intermediate class, which is people that had already been published. and I was just a raw beginner. But what I found going through the assignments was, as we went around the table, I was no different than the other people. No one was weeping, but I fit right in with the rest of them. So that was a good transition for me and a good motivation for me to get going.
Well, you've been writing articles for Business Insider. Writing those articles, has that, in regards to the experience and so forth, did that help you in regards to writing your first novel, becoming a published author?
Yeah, well, a lot of what I do is a lot of what I write is based on what is really happening in the world around me. A lot of my thoughts and ideas come from something I may have read in the Wall Street Journal that day, or someone I spoke to at a meeting, something I've heard. So the Business Insider articles, they're really, opinion pieces. They're not hardcore journalism. But like one of them I wrote about, it's called The Integrity of the Transaction, how Wall Street has lost this idea that, in other words, if you order something in a restaurant, you have a better pricing structure than if you're trying to sell stock in the stock market. And once you lose the integrity of what the price is, what the actual transaction is, then you've really lost everything. So that was one of the articles. But these things, I think about these things, and it comes through in my writing, I guess.
So you're writing about, to a great degree, you're writing about things that you already know about.
Absolutely. There's. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Not at all, John. I'd like the audience to get an idea. Like you've got a lot of different areas. Part of your creative process, I guess, where how you or where you get your inspirations from. And we've talked about some of these things like music, dreams, and so forth. Let's talk about some of these things for the audience, John.
Yeah. Well, music is a very, very important part of what I do, and the idea of putting so much into one short little story, in three minutes. There's a beginning, a middle, and the end. I love that, and people keep asking about writing style and so forth, and I don't, I'm not professionally trained. I really don't know what my style is, but I think about it in musical terms, and, I sort of, not that I make it up, I'm a daydreamer. I daydream about stories, and I sort of change it on the fly as I'm writing the novel. So what I'm hoping is that the reader is surprised by a turn of events or by a new character that just steps in. And that's because I was surprised when I was writing it, because I just thought of it. So I look at it as a recording of a live concert. It's not purely live and just free form, because it is edited and sort of cleaned up, but it's like a recording of a live concert. And I have a lot of dreams. I dream a lot about things that go into my novels. I'm pretty excited today because I had one of those dreams last night. And these are things that come to me, and I hope I have a little while to share it with you, because I just dreamed this last night, and maybe it's because I was anticipating this interview, but last night I dreamt that there was a young police officer, New York City police officer, maybe 23 years old, maybe he's on the job 2 weeks, and he's assigned to go to Central Park. There's a dream, so it's a little weird, but it'll make sense eventually. But he's assigned to go to Central Park, and there was a big party, and his job was to break down the party, and he was doing a very meticulous task, like folding up a cloth or a tarp or something. And he was, why am I doing this? I was just thinking, and then a car pulls up, an undercover car pulls up, and there's a man there that says, "Come with me." And they take him into the Central Park Police Station, which is a very cool place if you ever see it. But then they start asking him about, and this is the part that it's probably because of the upcoming interview, but they ask him about, what does he think about this? What does he think about that? And then I wake up. Now, this is how the process is. Now, so I wake up like at 5 in the morning because of this dream. Then I spend the next hour till the alarm goes off expanding upon that and thinking about how this could work in my next story. Is this cop a bad guy? Is he a good guy? Is he someone who They've known about him all along. Was he recruited into the police department for a reason? Because they want him to be there, and they know that he could be of use of them. And these type of and this really, that's how it works. So now the struggle is to find a way to fit that little scenario into my next book. And I'm already looking at the Central Park Police Station online, and I'm getting an architectural look at it, and it's the oldest police precinct in New York. It was made out of an old horse stable, so it's this interesting little building in the middle of a park that, who knows what's going on in there. But that's really the process, and I know it's not detailed and it's not a literary answer, but that's how it works, man.
Did you take notes while you were thinking about this at 5 o'clock in the morning when you woke up?
No. I sit there, and this goes back to the daydream. Now I'm daydreaming, or daydreaming. I dream it. I lie there. I went for a jog this morning. I thought about it, and to be honest, I'm so excited about this little idea that I sort of like when the phone rang for this interview, I'm like, oh, here we go, because I was looking online at the police station. So that's what happens. So
I should tell the audience that John's books are adult books, and they all have adult themes. But so we have something to look forward to based on the dream that you had this morning. At some point in the future, we'll have this in a book.
That's going in. I don't know where it's going in, and it could be in a different venue or something. But that idea, that's what happens. Sometimes you get an idea, or I get a line or something that a character I think would say. And a lot of times I'll build a scene around that because I want to use that line so much.
John, do you always know, at some point when you're writing the book or you start a book, do you know how the book is going to, what the plot is going to be through the book, what's going to happen to the characters, or do you kind of experience that as the reader does?
Yeah, I definitely experience it as the reader does. Like
really?
I have I know you've read my stuff and you notice there's a common thread is that there's always some sort of offshoot character. Rene Bertrand, House, Vinnie Castellini. There's always these little characters within it. So, I probably know beginning, middle, and end. But what's going to happen in between, and I know the principles, and I know what they're all about, but I do like popping in these little characters here and there that are interesting and quirky, and some are like incredibly evil, and some are nice. Like I have Esther Landsman in my latest book, and to me, I just loved her, such a regal figure. And, I didn't know about Esther Landsman until, I got about halfway in.
Well, do you feel that your books are character-driven, or is it the plot that drives your books?
I'm absolutely character-driven. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I love the plots. I love the stories. And some of the stories, when we talk about the individual books, I could tell you the specific events or things that motivated me to write it, but it is about character. It's about these people that you feel for them. I was thinking today about character and how I describe people. I think one of my favorite descriptions of a character is a character named Brogan, who's a federal agent who's sort of over the hill, and his old way of doing things doesn't work anymore. And I described him as Willie Mays batting .211 for the 1973 Mets. Like this great, unbelievable, beautiful athlete, but here you are watching him just in his decline, and it's so sad because of what he once was. And that's how he feels about himself. So that's what I like. I like the characters. I like the regular emotions they go through, and a lot of what I write is about choices that people make and the consequences of those choices. But I would like to think that I create the characters well enough that it will make sense that they made that choice, and you will understand why they made that choice.
You know, you and I, in the past, we've talked about something that happens to you as an author. You've talked about this line that you cross in regards to your characters. Let's get into that just a little bit.
Oh, yeah. You know, I was saying to you once before where I remember watching, you know, if you watch an interview with an actor or an actress, and they'll talk about a role, and they will say, he did this and he did that, and I never really got that. I thought, like, how pretentious, you know? But once I started writing this, I do feel that, you know, for a while I'm one of the characters as I'm writing it. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, like when someone goes through something emotional, I am upset as I'm writing it. And, you know, I've had times where I was crying after I write a scene, or I go back at something I wrote, and I look at it and I say, wow, that was really sad, even though I'm the one that wrote it. So it is, you get so into it that, you know, like I said, with waking up at 5 in the morning, once I'm in the middle of writing, that's why I usually have to do it in the summer, because it's just, you know, it's crazy time.
So you don't write
thinking like of the characters and dreaming like the characters. It's fun, but you know. I'd be better off left alone for a couple of weeks in the summer when I'm going hardcore.
Well, I want to ask, the way you talked about that, you're writing, when you're writing, is that mostly summer work then, or do you have a specific time each day that you write?
I do. I really need, like, my style, which I don't know how this is compared to other people, but I like to think, like, I'll think about this policeman in the Central Park. Now, I'll think about this for 2 weeks, and I'll get it all sussed out and figured out, and who he is and his name and how tall he is, if he loved his mother or whatever. And then I'll get in front of the computer and I'll just, bam, and I'll write it, and, like, you know, I'll write a chapter in one day, the chapter about him in one day. So that means I need, well, from 8 o'clock in the morning, or sometimes 5 o'clock in the morning, till 9 o'clock at night. And then I come out of my little room, you know, unshaven and cranky, because I think I'm like that cop now, you know?
Sure.
So,
you know, John, if we had a couple minutes, what would you want to say to your readers? Is there anything specific that you have in mind that you want your readers to grasp? We know about, we're going to talk about the common theme and so forth that runs through your novels. But anything specific you want to say? How about to people that might be thinking about writing themselves, you know, becoming a writer? What would you say to them?
You know, I do get asked that a lot, and people ask me, because I don't know if you could tell from the interview, I don't seem like the type of guy that's a writer, you know, and they ask me, like, how did you get into it? And the simple answer is to say, you know, just write, just go write. But it's more than that. I think that you have to have the confidence and belief that you can do it. You just really do. It's so easy to say, you know, I want to write a book, but deep down you're afraid of other people reading it or showing it to other people. And the point is, it really doesn't matter. And the other thing is, and this is guaranteed, people won't realize until they're doing it, but it will get better as you're writing it. You know, like with me, where I come up with things as it's going along. But if you think you have a story in your head that you think might be pretty good, then probably when you write it, it's going to be better than pretty good, because it's going to get better as you're doing it. So that really is the thing. You should just sit down and do it. And it makes your life so much more enjoyable. It really does. Having this thing, having a creative thing for you to do, my opinion, and I'll get deeper into this at another time, is it flows through your entire life. Like, since I started writing, my business has become much more successful. I think it's because every morning I wake up, I'm excited. Not only do I always, and this is a great gift if someone wants to think about writing, here's the end game. Not only will you always have something to do, but you'll always have something you want to do. Which is an absolute gift. You know, my wife asked me, what are we going to do when we retire? I said, well, I'm going to write. I don't care if no one ever reads anything anymore. I'm going to write my stories because I love doing it.
So it's not for you. John, I was just going to mention that it's not work at all for you. It's like a fun pastime for you.
Yeah, and now, as you can see, it's something I have to do, or else I'll keep waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning. So now it's become part of me. It's what I do. I'm a writer, and there's a line in I just thought of in Field of Dreams. James Earl Jones, when Kevin Costner said, "So you're going to write about this?" and he goes, "That's what I do." You know, and that's how it is sometimes. You know, it's what I do. I have to do it. So.
Okay. Well, John, we're going to take a short break. Before we do, I want to remind the listeners to be sure to tune in to the International Radio Book Tour with John Nuckel on June 16th. We'll have an in-depth preview of his first book, The Vig, with a dramatic reading from the book. And now we'll take a short commercial break, but we'll be right back. Welcome back to the International Radio Book Tour in progress. This is your host, Rich Gehlhausen, and with me today is author John Nuckel. So, John, let's talk about your first book, The Vig, and we'll start with the title, The Vig. What does that mean, The Vig?
Well, the Vig is the common phrase is, I guess, in the percentage that you pay a bookie. So, the bookie always makes a vig. If, he's going to make 20% no matter what, whether you win or lose. That's the vig. On the trading floors, the vig it's the cost. It's the spread. It's the difference between the bid and the offer. It's the cost to carry a position. It's, and also in the underground world, it's the tribute you have to pay to the guy who gave you the information. It's the payoff. It's the money you pay the guy on the loading dock to slip a box in the trunk of your car. That's the vig.
Well, the common theme running through your books is essentially, we're in an era of corruption. You've described it as it's such a big money era, and that's essentially that and the characters that run through your book. Let's talk about the Vig. What is this book about, really?
Well, the Vig really was the original idea. It's more of it's not the boardroom thievery. It's not the big mergers and acquisitions. This is really the story, a story about, the envelope that's passed in the bar out back, the little extra money that's, as I say, is put on the hip. It starts with someone who finds a way to steal like $4.87 from every single trader's brokerage account. And, it's such a small amount of money that no one ever notices. And if anyone does, they just say, "Oh, it's an error. I'll put the money back in your account." But, they have 15,000 accounts and there's 250 trading days a year. And they found a way to steal a lot of money or a little bit of money from a lot of people. So one of the characters, Frank, finds that this is going on, and he confronts them. And this is what makes one of the turning points of the story is he's offered, like, for example, ask the readers, the listeners, if they were offered $40,000 to look the other way about a crime that really doesn't affect anyone at all, what would you do? That's the decision. And that's where it comes into a character and right and wrong, and this character, Frank, decided he took $40,000. He said, I'm tired of all this nonsense. I'm just going to take the money and I'm going to look for a new job. But of course, he gets caught doing it. And then there are bigger themes. So that's the plot. That's the mystery. But overarching all of that is, like I said, the World Trade Center coming down and the imagery of this whole area, this whole, the empire of Wall Street sort of crumbling. Frank is running from the World Trade Center, and he's basically running from throughout. He's running from himself. He's running from his past. He's running from his past irresponsible behavior. And there's another character, Carla, who's an assassin, and she has an abusive childhood. She as she gets older, she chooses to hate and chooses to be violent, whereas Frank has a bad childhood and has these problems. And he's choosing to try to just get along. And then there's Brogan, like I said, Willie Mays, batting .211. You have all these people and all these different things going on in their lives that I think it makes for a really, really compelling story, because I think you really, really care about the characters. And, I try to make the main character in this book, who is Frank, an everyday guy, a guy that you walk by today on the sidewalk, just a regular, average guy. And it's interesting to me to see how someone, what happens in his development as a person too. But it's never a straight path, as we all know, in the real world. So there is no, big shootout in the warehouse where he shoots the gun out of someone's hand. There's none of that. This is pretty gritty, pretty hardcore. But like I said, this particular book, The Vig, it's a small little back room little side deals that goes on around. It's I worked down there. It was like a cottage industry. I mean, a lot of the things I write in The Vig really did happen. I was offered a bribe out back of the exchange to steer business someone's way. They said they'll give me $5,000 in cash every month if I send. That was a while ago. It would have come in handy. There was.
Well, John, the experience that Frank had.
I worked for someone who was skimming money from his employees. And there's some lighthearted things too that were real. Like there was, I did watch someone, a whole trading crowd put up $2,000 to watch a guy eat a bug.
Really?
So that happens too.
I want the audience to know something about you. In the first chapter of your book, when the protagonist, Frank McGinley, is running from the collapsing towers, that was your personal experience. Yes,
it was. And this was, when I originally wrote the first manuscript, I did not have that in, that's why that is the prologue. And I thought, and the reason why I didn't have it in was because, essentially I ran away. And there were so many heroes and so many brave people and so many sacrifices that were, obviously, I'm speaking to you, so I didn't sacrifice as much as many others. But I thought it would be disingenuous not to include that event if I'm writing about that era on Wall Street. It just, the enormity of it is the best word I can think of. Even if you weren't there, the enormity of it, all of the repercussions, and also, like I said, what it represents, the collapse of the old way of capitalism. It's just I guess it's sort of an unavoidable metaphor. I didn't want to be disrespectful, but I could not honestly write something about that era without including that in it. I just, it wouldn't be real.
Something I'd like to talk about, your primary character, Frank McGinley, something that we've talked about, you and I, is that you're not even sure if you like the guy.
Oh, yeah. I had, brought this up, I had an editor say that very disparaging words about Frank. And it had me taken aback for a while. And then I thought about it, and then I had a good laugh. Then I thought about it, and, you know what? I don't know whether he's a good guy or bad guy. I really don't. But it doesn't matter. I think, I like him. Would I lend him my car? Probably not. It may not come back. But, I like him. I think he tries, he tries to be a good man, but it doesn't come naturally to him. That's really what it comes down to. He's not naturally a nice person, but damn, he's trying. He really is.
I really enjoy your characters. Most of the characters are so real to me. I mean, there's people. I've never been in the financial industry, and yet I can look at these characters, the things that they go through, and I just feel very strongly that I've met these people. I've known them in the past.
Yeah,
so they're very real to me. I very much appreciate how you create your characters.
Well, that's what it's all about, right? You have to care about the characters.
Yeah, let's go back to the Vig itself, Brogan, some of the other characters in your book, the Vig, Carla. What a fantastic character! My gosh.
Oh boy,
let's
Carla.
talk a little bit about
Carla
these folks.
the people definitely have an opinion about her, and men tend to like her. But then I refer them to Chapter 5, and I say, think about it seriously, whether you like Carla or not. So she's in a lot of ways she's very sympathetic, and I strive to do this. I mean, she's a cold-blooded killer, psychopath, sociopath. I mean, just brutally violent. Yet there's a vulnerability because her childhood was so bad, and as she develops in other books, you see how she was manipulated as a child, and and she wishes that she wasn't this way. I really think that she does. I think she wishes that she wasn't this way, but she is. And like I said, in other books, she tries to be more human, and it just doesn't work. She's very damaged, very damaged. But what the bad part is that she's chooses to take it out on others. And that's the point about the different choices people make in the different people. Like I said, Frank is, he's damaged goods also. He really is. But you know what? He's trying, man. He's trying. He falls back, but he gets up and he keeps trying to move forward. Someone like Carla, she gave up. She gave up the attempt to try to be good. She's the one. She'll just, she's the fist. She's the fist in this little triangle. She's the one who throws the punches.
Let's talk about Brogan. You talk about the fist. Elaborate on Brogan just a bit.
Yeah, well, he's kind of a tough nut also, but he is, like I said, he's aging. He's going past his prime, and the old way of doing things, he soon learns, doesn't really work. And he was, like a master spy, head of the Justice Department. He wrote parts of the manual on how to do surveillance, like a high level guy. Think of like, Dick Cheney's evil twin. but in his heart, he's a good man. He's a good man. He has charities and all that, but he doesn't mess around. And he likes to get things done, and usually things get done, in the hard way rather than the easy way. But he's going through a thing too. He discovers that he's been on the trail of a criminal, this Harrison Haywood, for years, and he realizes that someone like Frank, who's savvy and market savvy and understands technology, Frank figures it out in like an afternoon. And Brogan's like, I didn't even know any of this or how this worked, and he realizes how things have passed him by. And then he decides he's going to find a way, in his way, to finish this one last job.
Brogan, he seems to be more interested in an ending for justice as opposed to something that was legal. He's more into the justice as opposed to what is legal.
Yes. Well, there's the what's morally correct and what's legal, and there's a lot of that. That line is kind of hazy in every aspect, but especially I think on Wall Street lately. Well, lately meaning the last 15 years. But no, there's a part where Brogan is speaking to Frank, and Frank looks at Brogan and he says, he knew that this was not going to end in a courtroom. However this was going to end, it wasn't going to be in a courtroom. And that's Brogan right there, John,
we need to talk about the second book in this series, Grit. And why Grit? Why did you name it Grit?
First of all, I love the word. Second of all, I like the way it just looks on the cover, But it is about... Well, and this is the sequel, so we're going to get the end of Carla and Frank in this book. And I did something I think is interesting where I played with the time a little bit. Like Carla you see Carla the day that the VIG ended. Mm-hmm. You see Frank 5 months later. So Carla goes on her little journey, her little path, which is, gets increasingly violent as it goes along, and they end up catching up. But this ends up being the confrontation, and the reason why I use grit is we're getting back to like the persistence or the desire to do the right thing. Like Frank's the kind of guy, like when he played basketball as a kid, he knew he had to get better, so he went out and shoveled the snow off the basketball court in the middle of winter so he could practice his foul shots. That's what he's all about. He's the guy who would run through the brick wall. He's the Irish mule. This is what he does. Work hard. He knows how to work. That's the thing he knows. And grit and determination is what gets him through. And the idea is, will grit or perseverance overcome savagery? And that was really the reason for grit.
Your character Carla, when looking at her background, her damaged childhood and so forth, but she is such a cold, complicated and yet accomplished killer. She just can't be stopped. It's one of the things that I find about her. I find myself having both sympathy for her, empathy for her, and yet at the same time, totally glad I have never met anybody like her, and I hope I never do.
I think there's a scene in Grit that I did this on purpose, and I don't know if people, if readers really get it, but I like to think, another thing about my writing is I like to think that, like I like to put in, like, these subtle metaphors, or subtle foreshadowing, like little things. I'll mention a line that someone used at the beginning of the book, and then at the end of the book, his adversary says the same thing to him. Things like that. But there's one chapter where Carla meets this pretty lounge singer, and she's enraptured by her, and she's like a girl. She's in love and giggly. She says she feels like the coolest guy in high school is talking to her. Like, that's how she feels, like this giggly little girl. But then, this lounge singer ends up being heartless, and then Carla comes out and, in her savagery, deals her form of justice. But in that one little chapter, it's like you could see that this is her in a nutshell. I wrote, I think it was in the VIG, where she was, she was very shy and broken, and she stayed indoors, and she never left, and she was living in Colorado at the time, and one of the first times she ever interacted with a person, like for years, was there was an old man on a bench across the street, and she went and sat down next to him because she saw him for days, and he was saying that he's about to die, and he was just sitting there looking at the mountains. And she sat with him, and she remembered that day, and there's someone who did, and then later in the story, she comes back into town, and she sits on that same bench late at night, and she looks up the mountains, and she thinks to herself, my God, I'm thinking about this person who had such an influence on my life, and he I was like a second in his life, and it just crushes her how alone she is, and it's those type of things that make you feel for her. Yet then, she slashes a guy, sticks a knife in a guy's neck, and throws him behind a dumpster 2 chapters later. So that's Carla. She's complicated.
Yes, she is. Well, all the characters, all of your characters, to one degree or another, are complicated.
Yeah.
We have to take a break, John. We're going to take a short commercial break. Before we do, I do want to remind the audience again, be sure to tune in to the International Radio Book Tour with John Nuckel on June 16th. We'll have an in-depth preview of the VIG. with a dramatic reading from the book. Now we'll take a short commercial break, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the International Radio Book Tours in Progress. I'm your host, Rich Gehlhausen, and with me today is author John Nuckel. John, we're going to continue our conversation with. We're going to talk about the last book in the series so far, Blind Trust.
Okay, Blind Trust. This is, it's a little different from my other books, where it's a little more, it's not as frenetic, I think is a good word. It's not as hard charging. This is another one that started with a dream. I had a dream one night, and that is the opening scene of the book. And I actually dreamed the person's name. I could smell the air. I knew what the sun looked like. So this is, when I get involved in doing this. But this really is about loyalty. And, I said on the back of the book that there's a lot of people that I worked with over my years on Wall Street, a lot of damn good people, really, who I put my blind trust in them. So I dedicated my book to them. But yeah, now in this book you have Frank and a character, Cat Wells from Grit. They're established now, and they're working with Brogan, and they're investigating Wall Street crime, and they have a nice little operation. Well, of course, something comes along. Well, it goes back in time about 40 years back, where Brogan was involved in something that now in the future comes back to haunt them. And a lot of this really is a commentary on what is actually happening now on Wall Street. I mentioned earlier reading something in the Wall Street Journal. The plot device really came from an article in Wall Street Journal. And, I could say it because it's been out there for a while, but a company called BNP Paribas, a French financial firm, was actually pled guilty to money laundering for the Sudan government and front running and illegal trading and insider trading. But like the Sudan government, where Darfur was, they were financing these evil warlords, and they actually pled guilty. And you know what happened? They paid a fine. Like $5 billion. So in my book, the bad guy who was involved in this type of behavior for years and years and years, he stands up and says, I don't feel bad. I stole my whole life. I front-runned. I financed governments. I've overthrown governments. I've had women and food and wine. I've had everything I want. Well, as you can imagine, on my fine, he doesn't end up paying a fine. So that's a lot of it. But what I really enjoyed my side characters in Blind Trust. Like I enjoyed, I mentioned before, Vinny Castellini. He's like a tough guy who grew up right across the street from Belmont Racetrack, which is not far from where I grew up. And, I knew these guys. I knew the guys who worked at the track.
John, I love your characters. I'm fascinated by the way that you talk about them as if they are real people. Where they grew up, their experiences they had, and so forth. Yeah.
It's, I used to go to Belmont Racetrack, and I knew a guy who knew a horse. I did a lot of that. And there's another character, House, who I really like. He's like an enforcer down in Miami. And like I said, I like Esther Landsman, who's a widow. There's a lot of characters, and I tried to make this not just character-driven, but more relationship-driven. So a lot of it is about Frank's relationship with Brogan. A lot of it is about the interplay between House and Ben Hirsch, who's one of the new characters. A lot is about all these things that go on, and at the end, it sort of is a tribute by Frank to Brogan.
Well, there's a line. John, there's a line at the back of your book, Blind Trust. The line reads, "There is no honor among thieves, but there is for those who hunt them."
Yes.
And I think that that line draws to the theme running through basically all your books, but in particular, Blind Trust.
Yes. No, I agree. There's a part where Ben, who is new, says to Cat Wells, from all the evidence, it looks like Brogan, who's their leader, it looks like he was involved in all of this. If you were an objective person, you would think that he was, he was part of this whole thing. Mm-hmm. And Cat just says to him, "Well, I have blind trust in Brogan. I just know that isn't true. It's inconceivable, actually." Mm-hmm. And obviously it isn't true, but that's really what it's about. And, a lot of this is, even though it's a thriller and there's plenty of fun stuff going on, plenty of action, adventure, and violence, a lot is really about love. It really is. Like there's a part that I really like, and this is going back to dreams. And, think about this. I use so much of this in my writing, which I don't know if I even realize that I do. But Frank has a dream, and to speak towards his whole character also, going, the whole theme running through the Vig and Grit. And he has a dream. He happens to be in rehab, and he's in rehab, not for the first time, but he's in rehab because he's having recurring dreams or thoughts about the love of his life who died in his arms. Mm-hmm. And what he has to realize is that he's there. He's in rehab because he's using that as his reason to be in rehab, but really that's his excuse for going back to drinking, the memories of her. But in the dream, he is in St. Patrick's Cathedral. And this is very dense, this part of the book, and I think a lot of my writing is dense. I try to pack a lot in, and he's in St. Patrick's Cathedral, and he's in a processional. He's walking in a processional, and he's not even religious, but there he is, and we're getting up to the altar, and he doesn't want to go to the altar, and he sees like his two friends there, and he just slips in. He sneaks out and slips into a pew. Then he waves over to them and says, "I'm going to go outside." He goes outside St. Patrick's Cathedral, and Fifth Avenue isn't there. In front of him, there's no Rockefeller Center. In front of him is this beautiful rolling field, and it's like an Ivy League campus or a beautiful park, and he could see in the distance men in whites playing tennis, and there's ivy running up the tennis court fence, and as he's walking, someone comes up alongside of him, and it's his father. And his father is like complaining and bitching, and it just ruins the whole thing. And finally, his father turns to him and says, "You can go back now." And as Frank is recalling the dream, he's sitting on a bench by the Hudson River, and he really feels like he died last night. That's how he feels. That's how strong it was. But back in the dream now, he after his father says you could go, he's at an elevator bank, and it's like in the Chrysler Building or the Empire State Building. It's beautiful Art Deco marble lobby, and there's 3 buttons, and one says 199, one says 99, and one says 1. So he presses 1, he opens up, he gets in, and it just barely closes and then it opens again. And he looks out, he looks up, and it says 99, but he looks in front of him, and there's St. Patrick's Cathedral. So he jumps out quick, and he's walking towards St. Patrick's Cathedral, and there she is, his love of his life is standing there, and she's wearing all white. And he goes up to her, and he doesn't know what to say, and he doesn't hug her. He just puts his arms out, and she takes his hands, and since he doesn't know what to say, he just says, "I was just on this elevator, and it was 199, 99, and 1, and I hit 99, and it brought me to you. But I pressed 1. What else is there?" And she just goes, "Shh, next time take the steps." And he wakes up. And there is his journey. There's his journey. Take the steps. Just take the steps, Frank. Write your book. Take the steps. Follow your daydream.
John, thank you. We are running out of time. I want the audience to know where they can go to find out more information about you, and where can they go to find your books.
Okay, the main place to find out about me is johnnnuckelauthor.com. That's JohnNuckel, one word, author, johnnnuckelauthor.com. My blogs, my articles, and the links to my books are there. I'm also on Amazon and Kindle, and, I hope people enjoy.
All right. Thank you, John. Thank you so much for appearing on our program today. Our next show with author... Thank you, John. Our next show with author John Nuckel, continuing the International Radio Book Tour, will be on Tuesday, June 16th. We'll have an in-depth preview of the VIG with a dramatic reading from the book. You don't want to miss that show. We're all looking forward to it. Now, the International Book Tour is managed and directed through Storytellers Campfire radio programs. To learn more about the program, please visit storytellerscampfire.org and click on the show page. Click on the International Book Tours. We also provide information and links for the guests featured on the program through our website. So again, visit Storytellers Campfire Radio at www.storytellerscampfire.org. And now to our listening audience from around the world, this is your host, Rich Gehlhausen, saying, have a very good day.